Hello everybody, Raven Knight here, coming at you with another advice video on how to better write your legends. This is something that I've been doing for a little while because for those of you who don't know, I like to write legends or stories for my For Honor characters, and there are other people who have told me that they feel inspired to write those themselves and have asked me some questions. Today I want to talk about two questions that kind of go along in the same vein, and I'm going to title this video, How to Make Your Legends Feel More Real. Like, how to make your legends feel a little bit more real, how to make them pop out, that kind of thing. And the reason I want to title it this is because these two questions that I get asked are kind of on the same vein of that. The first question is, how fantastical can I get? Like, how much fantasy can I give to my legend? And number two, how much do I have to stay historically or realistically consistent? And of course, people don't normally phrase it that way, but that's usually the direction they're going. Those are the two questions they're going with. And I feel like these two questions go hand in hand, so I kind of want to answer those today. So if you guys are working on your own legends and you're having trouble making it feel real or, you know, not as fantastical, then I would listen to this, and I hope that this helps you out. So let's answer the first question. How fantastical can I get? How much should I give into fantasy? So there's no simple answer to this. I would say as a general rule to evade most fantastical elements if you can, and if you must add them, make them sparse and not the primary focus of the story. Now even then, you can make certain fantasy elements work, like I made my Kensei a literal Jorogumo, and I had one of my conquerors possessed by a malevolent entity. But the problem is, if you push it too far, it can become kind of cringe. Your audience is going to notice that you're not just telling a story anymore, you're creating a fairy tale, one of your own making, where you're trying. There's this really old joke that I've seen in some stuff. Like, I think my favorite one is like in The Legends of Aventris. Oh, let's play that clip.
These unicorns remind me of my OC pony Dewdrop Starshine. She was actually a princess. She had two different colored eyes, and she was the only one that could learn force healing. I mean, special magical unicorn healing. And she didn't have to work for it at all.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's meant to be a joke, right? That's supposed to be a joke, but you'd be surprised how often I see people make their OCs like this, you know, and when you see it, you just cringe. For this joke, it's funny, but when you see someone actually do that seriously, it's kind of like, ugh, you know, it's kind of gross. So let me give you an example of what I mean and how I would approach this. If you were to say, my Warden character drank from the chalice of immortality like Ramiel did and became immortal, but instead of drinking once, he drank numerous times and as a result has gained some draconic attributes, I'd probably shrug my shoulders and say, you know, that's fine, but what kind of draconic attributes? Are they a hindrance to him? Do these have any negative consequences to him? Like, what kind of things is this doing good for him? What kind of things is this doing bad for him? Like, that kind of thing. That would be kind of where I go with that. But as you can see, it's not too terrible. But if you were to say instead, my Warden is the offspring of a dragon and a fairy princess that can fly and shoot fire from their sword, I would laugh at you.
That doesn't make any sense.
Why? Because here's the difference. The primary difference here is the subtlety. In the first example, you drew an existing supernatural item from the lore of For Honor and just twisted the rules slightly to make it work for you. You just added on like a singular rule that if you drink too much from it, it can have consequences. But in the second example, you created a whole new set of rules that there are fairy princesses in the world of For Honor and that dragons are still around. And based on literally no evidence or existing information did you apply these. And your audience is going to recognize this as cringe. People are going to look at this and say, ugh, that doesn't work very well. In all things, I would say subtlety and reverence to original lore is going to matter. That is going to be very, very important as you go forward. So I would just recognize subtlety and, you know, just try to lean back to the fantasy a little bit. Like, even in my Jorogumo story, yes, the main character was a Jorogumo, but what I really explored there was her trying to come to terms with being more human rather than being more monster. And it was also the story of her trying to find someone she cared about, which drew away from the whole Jorogumo thing. If you make the whole thing just about look at how special my character is because of what fantastical elements I've given them, people are going to be very undone about it. It's not going to feel real. It's going to feel like your personal fantasy brought to life, and that's not going to appeal to everyone other than you. Now, to the second question, how important is historical or realistic consistency? Okay, this goes back to the old argument about the relevance of history and For Honor. I won't go into that here, but I would say this. Despite what naysayers may whinge about, history has relevance. How much relevance is debatable, sure, but half of the selling point of this game was on the historical nature of these warriors. And as such, if you deviate from historical aspects, you do so at your own peril. I had a community member some time ago who is no longer a community member, who was a massive Viking fan. And during a stream, he tried to pull a sort of my faction is bestest faction, where he wrote a short story in the chat about a Viking clan attacking a village, killing all the knights and samurai guarding it, burning down the village, but the Jarl was nice and let the women and children go. Now, this short story had various problems. Leaving aside, he was posting the short story in a stream chat room, one of the worst places to do that, by the way. And the first problem was, he had samurai and knights defending this village together. Why? Was it a knight village or a samurai village? Was there an alliance we didn't know about? What were they both doing there? Like, there's no context for why they're there. It's just him saying, look, my faction is bestest faction, so I'm going to have them beat the other two factions. The second problem was the idea of the Vikings winning easily in this battle, as if they had virtually no problems in combating the knights and samurai, who are their long-known rivals. And I would also add this, I would say this, if you're going to write a big battle scene, you should not make it an easily won battle in most cases. And if you're going to make it easily won, you need to really establish what made it easily won. You can't just say, oh, well, the Vikings easily won that because the Vikings are the best and they would never have any problems with knights or samurai. No, that we have no evidence of that. We've seen in the game proper that Vikings can struggle against the knights and samurai, just as the knights can struggle against Vikings and samurai can struggle against knights and Vikings. We've seen struggle on all sides. If you're going to establish they beat them easily, especially knowing the knights and samurai are defending the same village, how'd they do that? That's going to be a big one. And then third, and the biggest one of all that I honed in on, was that the Vikings spared the women and children. I pointed out that this is not typical Viking behavior historically, as Vikings were known for enslaving, butchering, and sexual assault. And this led to debate over the involvement of historical atrocities like that in legends. Now, the way I see it, it comes down to a certain air of honesty. You want to tell a story about Vikings, but you want to ignore the more nuanced or even wicked aspects of their culture and behavior. I suppose that's not impossible. You could tell the story of a Viking clan that raids a village and wins and loots it, and that's that. Nothing at all wrong with that, I'd say. I think the real problem is when you start taking it a step further and you start lying, saying, oh, they spared the women and children. Well, that feels a little dishonest. My first question would be, why? I'm not saying you can't have a good answer for that, but there has to be an answer. Why did they spare the women and children when we know that's not how typical Vikings behaved? You can't just say, well, I didn't want to draw attention to the heinous things Vikings did, because the reality is many of us know the heinous things Vikings did, and we're going to know, hey, this doesn't feel right. If you don't mention it at all, if you just say, and they burned down the village, hey, it's fine. You didn't draw attention to the atrocities. You didn't draw attention to the evil. You just left it ambiguous, and we can decide for ourselves whether or not that actually happened. But the minute you say, oh, and they spared the women and children, it's almost like you're trying to overcompensate, because we know what Vikings would actually do, but I'm not going to have them do that, because in my fantasy, in my personal world, that wouldn't happen. Unfortunately, we have to acknowledge some of the darknesses of history, and how we approach them is going to matter in our storytelling, especially when writing legends about historical warriors. What I would do is, if you want to say that the Jarl spared them, have a reason. Maybe this Jarl, maybe his village was raided once upon a time and he witnessed the atrocities done and he doesn't want to do that anymore. Or maybe he wants to prove a point to the Vikings that we don't have to enslave women or children or, go into sexual assault or, that kind of thing. We don't have to do that. Or maybe establish that he has a personal beef with the king of this village or the governor of this village and its warriors, but not with the people, and so he's going to show magnanimity. Or maybe this village used to belong to him, and the women and children there are actually Norse-born, and so he's going to spare them because they're actually his citizens. There are lots of ways you could do this and make it work, but just saying, I don't want to draw attention to it, that's going to feel dishonest. And it's going to feel like people are not at all and it's going to make people feel like Why would you do that? You know, that's the big question, I would say. And then finally, I guess the next part that I would say, this isn't really a question that I was asked, but it's something that I feel will help in making a scene feel real. What you want to do is when you're setting up a scene or making a story, you want to make your audience feel like they're there. They don't have to necessarily empathize with everything the main character does, but you want to make them feel like they are in the moment. And the way I would do that is establish the senses. So, what does your character smell? What do they see? What do they hear? What do they taste? Like, you could describe a battlefield, like, think of it like this. You can say, like, idea one, you say, and he stood upon the battlefield. Okay, we know where he is, but what about the battlefield? So instead, go to the senses. What does he see? Let's start with that. What does he see? He sees blood splattered upon the green grass. He sees clouds covering the sky, making an overcast image that makes it look like rain is about to weep from the heavens. He sees fires burning in various places. He sees bodies strewn across the ground, mangled and torn up, with ravens flying about, pecking at the corpses. This creates a very somber atmosphere. Let's go further. How about what he hears? He hears the distant booming of thunder. He hears the crackling of the fires. He hears the ghostly murmuring of the wind. Gives you something to hear. How about smell? Does he smell anything? He smells death. The burning bodies. The blood on the ground. He smells rain in the distance. That gives you more. How about taste? He tastes blood in his mouth. He tastes iron. Okay. Now, taste is a difficult one to do, but if you're injured or you've been bloodied, you might taste blood in your mouth. You know? And then touch. He feels the weight of his sword. He feels the fatigue on his shoulders. He feels the pain of lacerations and bruises all over his body that his armor could not buffer. And you can even take the feeling from a physical one to an emotional one and say, he feels the weight of loss. By combining these senses, by bringing all these senses together, you can create not only an idea of what the character is feeling and what they're experiencing, but where you are in the world and what they're dealing with. This makes your audience very focused. But if all you say is, oh, they're on the battlefield. What battlefield? What's special about it? You've got to set a stage, you know, you got to give us kind of a setup. I'm just saying, you got to kind of make us feel like, oh man, we're in the moment. That's how you make a character and situation feel real. You ditch some, like, so I think basically to summarize this, and I apologize that I'm rambling here because it's not an exact science. Writing is never an exact science. There's always going to be, you know, exceptions to a rule. There's always going to be like things you can do that are creative or different. But the way I see it is this: if you want to make your story and legend feel more real, 3 things. Number 1, be subtle with your fantastical elements if you must have them. Be subtle. Don't make them cringe, I would say, and I think I've explained how to not make them cringe. Keep them within the established lore of the world that For Honor has given us. Number 2, how historical should you be? I would say be historical to the point that you're not lying to your reader. You don't have to make everything exactly one-to-one historical, but don't lie to your reader and say, oh, well, this aspect of their culture is irrelevant. Believe me, people are going to notice. And then 3, try your hardest to make your reader feel that they're part of the moment. Because if you do that, they're going to feel that it's all that more real and breathtaking. And you're like, well, that sounds hard, Raven. I never said it was easy. I've been writing for years. This took me a long time to really learn like different ways of writing, different styles, different ways of putting out characters. And what I may need to do is do a video where I talk about how to better make people like or appreciate your characters, or how to better describe a scene, like using metaphor and simile. Maybe I'll do that at some point. But right now what I really wanted to do is answer these 2 questions, and I hope I did for you. I hope you liked this video, and I hope that it helped you guys out. Hope that your legends come out a little bit better as a result of this, and thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next video. Take care.